right, Michael, we're ready to go.
Okay, good morning. Thank you, everyone, for calling in. Monday morning, January 23rd, this is a Technical Advisory Committee meeting for the Rural Transit Study in the San Joaquin Valley. The study is a MPO and Caltrans effort led by UC Davis Institute of Transportation Studies. On the phone, we have Laura and Caroline from UC Davis, but I'm going to go ahead and take a short roll call here, starting north to south with the MPOs. Anyone from San Joaquin Council of Governments?
This is Lorena Mendiblis with Caltrans District 6.
Okay, thank you, Lorena. Anyone from Stanislaus Council of Governments?
Isael Ojeda.
Isael, okay, thank you. How about Merced County Association of Governments?
This is Natalia from MCAG.
Okay, thank you, Natalia. Madera County Transportation Commission?
Hi, this is Amelia.
Amelia, okay, thank you. Fresno Council of Governments? Kings County Association of Governments? Tulare County Association of Governments? Asha had emailed me just before this call. Okay. Kern Council of Governments? Anyone from Kern Council of Governments? All right, we're a little weak on the MPO side this morning. I noted Caroline and Laura, and then we have Lorena from Caltrans District 6. Did I miss it? Can any other folks that I didn't call out identify yourself, please?
This is Elizabeth Forte from TCAG.
Okay, hi, Elizabeth.
Hi.
Anyone else?
Michael, this is Terry King.
Okay, thank you, Terry. Anyone else?
This is Mauricio with MCAG as well.
Mauricio Torres. Okay,
yes.
Very good. Anybody else?
Yes, Suzanne Campbell and Linda Yerbata with Kern Council of Governments.
Oh, okay, you guys popped on. Good. Suzanne and Linda. Okay. Well, now we do have a good representation from the MPOs. We're missing San Joaquin COG. Anyone from San Joaquin COG? Fresno COG? Anyone from Fresno COG? Okay, did I miss anybody else? Okay, well, we have 6 of the 8 MPOs. We have Caltrans and a few other folks, transit agencies. So I think we're okay. Laura and Caroline, I know there's a lot of information to cover, so please proceed.
Okay, great. I think I heard 2 more join on. Who else joined on? Can you share who those little beeps were? Or maybe they didn't.
Hey, this is Melody Lynn and Yvette Jimenez from SJCOG.
Oh, great. Okay.
Hi, Melanie.
Hi, everyone.
And this is Tom Dumas at Caltrans District 10 in Stockton.
Oh, Tom. Okay, now we can start.
Great. And I don't know if Shawnee Alford chimed in. She's going to be a new addition to our team, and so I know she's participating today. I can see her name, so I just wanted to let you know that so you can note that on the record, Michael, and then also introduce Shawnee as a part of our new team. So she'll be more involved in future TAC meetings, but I believe today she'll just be listening in.
And her name is Shawnee?
Shawnee Alford, Alford. So you can note her as UC Davis.
Okay, got it.
Great, and with that, Caroline's going to be running the meeting today, just going over a lot of the data information she's putting together for the existing conditions report, and she just really wanted to walk through this with everyone so they're aware of the information she's been collecting, how she's putting that together. So with that, I will turn it over to Caroline.
Hello, everybody. So move to the first slide. Okay, so today I'm basically going to go over kind of the data and the methods that I've collected to this point, and have the last 8 slides where I kind of integrate this data, and I'm hoping to get your feedback on it, and I have some suggestions to what it seems to point to. So just bear with me. I'm going to try to move through these initial kind of data descriptions and maps pretty quickly because the meat of the presentation's at the end. But please do interrupt me if you don't understand, if I'm not saying clearly enough what you're looking at here.
Right. Caroline, can you just take one step backward and remind everybody where we came from here? In terms of last time we spoke, it was about establishing the criteria and focus.
That's right. So now, I've been collecting a lot of data, and now I'm kind of trying to bring together this data at the census tract level to identify areas that may meet the criteria. So that is kind of based on kind of this disaggregate data. So that's where we are. I hope, is that helpful?
Yes.
Okay. So this is basically this is what's going to inform the existing conditions report along with a discussion, a more qualitative discussion of our findings from our stakeholder outreach and, our TAC meetings. So, I'm just to briefly review, we identified disadvantaged rural communities, the census tracts. We used, we spoke to the TAC and used various criteria to identify which census tracts in your county were rural. And then we identified disadvantaged communities as being greater than 75% ranking for the California EnviroScreen. And then we did circulate that to everybody, and we made minor modifications that we all kind of talked about and seemed reasonable. And I did, I recently attended a meeting with Professor London, Jonathan London, and I think the CES rankings are good, but he kind of brought home the message that it's a tool for one thing, for one kind of decision making, but I think it's important to look at other criteria, what's going on in the community. So I've tried to bring that into the analysis a bit more. It's a tool, but you can't use it, like what did he say? It's not the... It
has some, shortcomings, and so he also felt it was important to look at other metrics, and those I'm not clear of what ones that he discussed, Caroline, or which ones you incorporated, but yeah.
Okay, so I've tried to incorporate, and I have more data than I'm incorporating here as well, but we can talk about that later. Okay, so here I've just documented the modifications made by the TAC members. Okay, and then here you have the maps. We have some maps now, which I actually not quite happy with. I want to break them out by county. It's just the area is too large. I think, to put them on 3 different maps. But here you can see, the areas in red are the disadvantaged rural areas. And then I've highlighted, we've done our best to include the names of the census designated places or cities and the major cities. There's still some issues with this map, but I'm revising them with the GIS person. Okay, so basically what we started with at the very beginning of the project was a manual review of transit services and plans. A lot of the stuff was on, you have very nice websites with all the schedules and that sort of thing. And then also we looked at the plans that provided more background for us and, gave us information on costs of providing the service and the use of the service. I'm only providing the cost of the services in the tables today. So, we looked at that, and I noticed very recently that a lot of you now have your schedules on Google Transit, so that's been a change. So we were able to kind of check that. So you can see in the next, subsequent slides, here I have, I've done my best by city or census designated places. These are more aggregated units than the census tracts, but just to basically get a sense of the number of round trips, the cost per passenger, whether dial-a-ride service is available, and then the cost per passenger for dial-a-ride. So that was my first kind of qualitative, or looking at the maps, and then we did general, Google Transit searches from, the cities to cities. So you can see I've done this for all. And I'd really appreciate it if, one of the things that would be nice is if I had more complete information on the cost of providing the dial-a-ride service. If any of you have more information available, more current information, that would be really helpful. I mean, it helps as you'll see later, it helps us gauge whether, something like UberX could really benefit your region in the short term. So are there any questions here? Okay. So we can just move through. You can use that as a reference, and I refer to these as I discuss the census tract, the more detailed data later. Okay, and just recently, because all of you, many of you have now added your schedules to the Google Transit API, we were able to collect data. We were able to develop a program that collects data on existing transit services from origin to destination census tracts. I have zones here, but it's census tracts. So we use centroids for the origin, which is the most concentrated area in the census tract for population, and for the destination, the centroid represented the most concentrated employment location in that tract. So we were able to identify whether there was transit service between those origin-destination pairs, the fare, transfers, and in-transit travel times. So, in the presentation today, I'm basically using this to understand if there is transit service between origin-destination pairs by census tracts. And the destination, for purposes of this presentation today, but that's not, I have more destinations in my data set, we'll use, the major city in your county. Okay, so moving on, we also developed a program that does something similar with a similar, centroid connectors between census tracts, where we collect data on, from Google API, the Google Maps, on travel time and distance between origin destination zones. And then I applied the Uber fare structure for Fresno to the miles and minutes to calculate the UberX cost for these various census tracts, origin and destinations. And then I also applied the Zipcar fare structure for Sacramento, and I found that the costs were not that great. It's basically right now that's I think $4.50 per hour. They don't seem to have a distance fee. They have a membership fee, but I'm just thinking about we could as part of a subsidy the fees could be waived. So we're talking about 3 to 5 hour round trips, which would be about $13, $14 to $23. So this is in some areas this may be something to look at. Okay, and then I also had some conversation. I think many of you know we're conducting a survey with self-help enterprises in their affordable housing units, and also with Fresno Housing Authority. And just to understand what trips they're not able to access, residents aren't able to access, what they wish they could access, and some indication of a willingness to participate in a car sharing program. But anyway, I talked to some other people and about the types of affordable housing units There are many different types. It's kind of a new area for me. But they basically said that the housing tax credit allocation units for affordable housing, this type of affordable housing may be more suitable for hosting a car sharing type ride sharing organization because, of the requirement that they have communal facilities and operating budgets that might be able to support these types of programs. So I also, I don't have the data for this, but someone also mentioned that the USDA housing units might be appropriate. I don't know. But I'm trying to include, to give a representation of the number of housing units, to get some understanding by census tract of the number of housing units that could be used potentially for a car sharing, ride sharing type program to host that. And if you had any data that that you think, or any way to supplement this data with or development, affordable housing development type complexes, that would be great. Any questions yet? Okay. So, and then also we looked at the availability of mobile wireless broadband service. So we have this, California has data on that where they classify areas that are served, unserved, and underserved. So I've classified served as 1, you can see later on in the table, underserved is 2, and 3 is unserved. So 1 is best, and 3 is worst. So this helps us understand where, we might have technical problems using a program that relies solely on smartphones. And then I've included some of these maps here that kind of illustrate, just to show you what these maps look like, but these are kind of rough working drafts right now. Okay, so we're moving on. How are we doing for time? Oh, great. Okay, we're doing okay. So, okay, this next slide, I'm going to give you an overview of the more detailed results by county that I've been looking at. So in these next tables, I show the rural disadvantaged census tracts without transit service. So this is basically, that's what, when we run our program, Google says that these census tracts don't have transit service. Based on, looking at this data, it's, it does look like many of these areas are served by dial-a-ride, but so it looks like it's mostly, lack of fixed route. And there could be problems with the Google data, so we can talk about that as well. So you'll see, we have auto travel distance, minutes, auto travel distance, auto minutes between origin and destination pairs, and the Uber X cost using the the Fresno fare structure. And then we'll have a CAH column, which has the California Affordable Housing Tax Credit Allocation Units, the quality of mobile wireless broadband service. And then I did include, some, a few of the data points that I thought were kind of most relevant: total population, percent vehicles unavailable, percent lower than the minimum income, percent less than 18 years old and greater than 65, as well as the CES rank. Okay. Any questions before I start on? Is Fresno County here now? If not, I'll skip.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, great.
This is Peggy.
Oh, hi, Peggy.
Hi.
Okay, so any questions before we dive into Fresno? It's okay if, do you have any questions, Laura, based on that? Was it clear? Okay, okay. So looking at Fresno County, and this can be an interactive discussion, but, when these, again, all these are census tracts with city, their census tracts, and this is measuring where they have service, transit service that goes from that census tract to Fresno, kind of a major hub area in Fresno City. So, and then you've got the auto miles, auto minutes, UberX cost, population, and then all those other categories and CES rank. So basically, when I looked at this area, overall, and if you refer back to the transit service map that I presented earlier, we see that this area has to serve very long distances. They have infrequent transit service, but a relatively extensive dial-a-ride system. This is a general categorization, you can correct me. It's relative to other areas. There's some pretty tough areas to serve here. If you look down at the bottom, from Reedley to Fireball, the cost of an UberX service, is about close to $100 to $150. However, we did see that if you look at the CHAH column, you can see that there are a lot of affordable housing units, the California tax credit affordable housing units in many of these areas, and so those could be locations where some car sharing programs that perhaps they could be car sharing hybrid ride sharing programs may be helpful. I did see. It also seems that UberX may be affordable in the census tracts that are closer to Fresno City and in Fowler. So in Fowler, their dial-a-ride plus transit is about $38 based on the productivity report I was able to get from Fresno Rural Transit. So it's a little bit more, but just for reference point, that's what we're seeing there. The mid-range is pretty tough. It probably may be difficult if you're not implementing a ride-sharing type service. And how exactly that would work, we need to look into that a bit more. So do you have any comments on Fresno, the analysis, questions? This is the first one to see.
No comments or questions right now. We just got to soak in this data.
Okay. Yeah, I've been spending a lot of time thinking about it, and if there are corrections, and one thing that may make sense is if I maybe talk to the transit person in each of your county, go over this, and I can get more specific information, maybe maps with the census tract identified. Okay, and I'm trying to just give you, some sense of what might work for your region based on this analysis and where the needs might be.
I have a quick question, Caroline. With this table, is it showing the cost per person to serve these regions by the transit agency, or where is that?
No, I didn't have time to include.
Column? Okay.
That is in the early pages, and then when I redo this table. I actually only got some of this data Saturday night, so I had to. But I basically refer back to a lot of my discussion about this today refers back to the kind of qualitative assessment I did
with the transit service, okay,
and the reports. So yeah, does that help? Does that make sense?
I think that's an important piece of information too, in thinking about what census tracts and serving those census tracts, where is the heaviest burden on the part of the public agency in providing service.
Yeah, and I don't always have that information, so the more I can get on that, the better. I can integrate it with this data to help you hopefully help.
Carolyn?
Yeah?
Carolyn?
Yes.
Hi, this is Peggy. I do have a question now that I'm trying to soak in this table. So are you saying, say at the top line, that there is a census tract in the city of Fresno that's not covered by fixed route transit?
Yes.
Okay, and that would take you 8 miles to get to Fresno?
Yes, from the
You
location
mean like
we had.
the center of Fresno, downtown?
I
What-
believe it's downtown.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, it'd be nice to know what these census tracts are.
Yeah, and that's the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have these highlighted. But I wanted to kind of get a sense, there are some that, what, kind of back of the envelope, what we're talking about as to, what the cost would be to provide Uber service.
Okay.
You can see UberX. I mean, that's kind of one of the near-term, easier things to implement. You could expand the boundaries with, some public outreach effort. Perhaps that, thinking, of course, there would be many more trips than there are by dial-a-ride, but to figure out what you could kind of afford, that kind of makes sense there.
So we would just have to know that census tract. So again, Peggy, I'm looking at this too so I was chatting with Caroline right before this meeting, and there's several that say Fresno, and those are census tracts, and I'm just not sure what they're.
Well, there are lots of census tracts for.
So would we know, I mean, I guess it would be just putting it together with a physical map to show and it's like what census tract that one represents.
That's right. So I just need to pop these up. Like I said, I just got this data Saturday night, so I couldn't make a map. And my map makers aren't very, very quick. Not as quick as I can do a table. So, but I think this is kind of, this is.
Gives you a first cut of understanding what it would take to serve via Uber in a census tract that's near downtown Fresno, 8 miles versus, Firebaugh, that's 53. And looks like there's 2 census tracts in Firebaugh, so.
And Fowler's, I think, Fowler is, so Fowler has fairly frequent nearby, but let's see, that has dial-a-ride.
Yeah, this is Moses with FCRTA, and sorry about joining late. I had another meeting, but I was looking at this chart and I caught the tail end of the presentation on this census tract with no transit service. And I don't know how much information you have, because I did provide the productivity evaluation, and also too, with the exception of maybe Cantua Creek here, all these communities have either dial-a-ride, demand response, 1 to 4 vehicles per incorporated city, and we have all the inter-transit from all these outer-lying areas into Fresno daily, Monday through Friday.
And I do have that. Since you came in late, I have that at the beginning of my presentation. I'm able to represent, I represented that pretty generally. I represented Cantua Creek, and so, for example, so I have that Fowler has 3 round trips a day. Fowler has, and I have all the areas with dial-a-ride, and I did gather all the information I could. But from our analysis, this is why I'd like to have feedback with you. These census tracts come up on Google Transit as, you can't walk to a bus stop to get there. It's outside of. So there are lots of these census tracts in the area, but these are areas, and it's so I mean we can go. I can map these, and I do. I went over. I spent a lot of time. I proofed all these data, and I spent a lot of time on the map. So I basically can see the frequency of routes by the cities, census designated areas, but it's hard for me to link them to the specific census tract and the
Right, and also
accessibility.
too, you have to go beyond Google Transit because Cantua Creek, we have San Joaquin Transit that goes out there, and it's on designated dates that it goes out to Cantua Creek and El Porvenir, as a matter of fact.
Well,
Carruthers has multiple systems that go out there, including one from CART, Kings Area Transit. Del Rey is a continuous dial-a-ride daily, Monday through Friday, that goes from Del Rey to Sanger.
Okay, so you know what? It would really help me. I mean, I looked at county schedules. It would really help me if, now that you see this, if I could get some comments. I'm dealing with 8 counties here and multiple interconnecting services. I didn't just, I reviewed the schedule and we tried Google Maps. So if I could get helps where there are gaps, it's not so much, that we don't have, it sounds like I'm missing some data, and I would need to get that from you.
Yeah, and to draw any conclusions before that's completed, it's kind of premature because there's a lot of important missing information here, especially when you have anywhere from 1 to 4 vehicles within each city providing dial-a-ride, and then you have every incorporated city connected in Fresno County coming into Fresno daily with 1 to 4 trips throughout the day. And then the fares are somewhat reasonable, as they have not been raised in the last 10 to 12 years. The in-city fares are free for disabled and seniors. How can you beat that?
Okay,
General
yes.
public
And
range
I am
from 35 cents to 70 cents.
Okay. Well, and, I think I would love to work with you to get more information. I mean, this is, I am not making any conclusions. I am just, no, that it's not my place to make conclusions. I certainly would help. It would, I'm sure that there are areas where we don't have information that we would need to have information on, and you can look at my PowerPoint. Perhaps I can, as I think I said earlier, I don't know, I'd like to have a conversation, with each of the transit agencies to see what might be missing here.
That's fine.
But there are new data. What I'm trying to kind of show you is here is not to criticize the transit service in the area, there's actually a lot of really good transit service in the area. It's just, we are trying to understand where we might be able to use UberX at a reasonable cost, if that's something that the county wanted to do. And we'll see that there are limited options there. Working out a shared ride program, is challenging in an area where you have populations are geographically dispersed, and their trip times are made in different times of the day. Getting the density to support that could be challenging. What I do think is in some of these areas that are really far, that there are ride-sharing systems right now that are starting to be implemented in coordination with these affordable housing units, including pilot projects that are able to exist without subsidy in Colorado. This may be a reasonable alternative for some of these communities that are really far out. So that's my only, my comment and insight right now. And I'm trying to ground truth with the cost of UberX. A lot of people have said, oh, we can use UberX, but you can see it's pretty expensive. So, it's definitely not a one-size-fits-all. And does that seem okay then? Does that help set this up a bit more for you?
And Moses, I think so, the invitation is to schedule a call with you sometime in the near future, and Peggy, obviously please join us, and we can go over these in more detail for just Fresno County, and that invitation is, for all the COGs, obviously.
And like I said, I will try to, I'll make maps, and I will do my best to incorporate the information on, the dial-a-ride service more directly in a table like this, and, the frequency of transit service in, the city area that's covered. Okay, so moving on to Kern County. So Kern County, so this is kind of similar, I think it's kind of similar to Fresno. You've got really long distances that you have to serve. It's expensive to provide frequent services. The dial-a-ride service, at least according to my data that I could identify, is somewhat limited. You do have it in Fraser Park, Lamont, Lost Hills, Rosamond, Taft, and then you do have your medical dial-a-ride. We did see opportunities here, for maybe an UberX type service at a reasonable cost in some areas of Bakersfield. I had some data I had pretty limited data on the cost of your dial-a-ride service and transit service in your region. So, just thinking, if the cost is about $40 per trip, some of these areas in Bakersfield are less than that for UberX. And you've also, these are very populous areas relative to other areas in the cities, and they're concentrated in areas with that are pretty hard hit. You've got here, 16% vehicle unavailability in one of these and 11% in another. Really high levels of poverty, high youth populations. And we see there's an affordable housing unit, maybe a car sharing program. Interesting here. I know Arvin is a big, a census tract. Arvin is a place where, we heard from the focus groups that, this is something people were interested. It's not cheap though. It's not cheap to provide it. There is however, there's maybe the potential of a car sharing program at a affordable housing complex. And then we have one in McFarland. McFarland does not have DIR, dial-a-ride service according to my table. And Arvin doesn't either. So, and Lost Hills does. So this is, car sharing and affordable housing units in some of these areas may be an option for you, and low-hanging fruit perhaps in certain areas of Bakersfield. Any questions there? That's just my observation from the data, but we could talk about it a bit more. Oh, and another problem, I'm sorry, you have here is if you notice many of these cities are unserved. Many of these census tracts are unserved by mobile wireless broadband service. So that would be an additional challenge. So if you can see here the concentration of C3s from the second chapter in the column to McFarland, right before Lost Hills. Questions, concerns?
Hey, Caroline, this is Linda. I have a couple of questions. On the CAH numbers, we have a lot of zeros. Is that because you were only looking at public provided?
I only included the California tax credit allocation.
Okay.
So, but if you think there are other locations that could support a car sharing type, I've been told the USDA properties, I don't have data on that yet, could be useful. And I'm trying to talk to Matt Palm he's at the State Department of Housing or Community Development to get that data. I only have right now the California tax credit allocation. You know, it's hard to tell. He's basically indicated to me that, you know, these types of units have facilities, have a communal room, and some operating budget.
The California, the tax allocation.
That's right.
And that's why you chose
that. That's why I chose
there's a requirement for the
right.
community room and some of those additional amenities.
And I've heard from a couple of people, but, you know, this is not my area of expertise. I'm sure, you know, perhaps when I put some of these areas on the map, you know, you may be able to come up with your local knowledge that, hey, there are other locations in here that we think could support something like this.
Okay. And then on the transit, you know, the tables that you showed earlier, there were NAs all across the board for us. Is that, were you pulling the information off of the internet, or were you counting on the agency to give you that data?
So basically it's from the reports. So I have the fares, I have everything online about the fares, but it's the cost per passenger per route that I'm looking for.
Okay.
So it's the operating cost per passenger. And I couldn't find that. I also have been getting passenger miles. I have that in another table. Passenger miles and passenger hours. So we understand, you know, how much, those are the kind of more frequently referenced data points. I didn't show those today. But I think what, you know, might be good if we have individual meetings, I can show you maybe all the data I have. You know, we can go through it together, and you can perhaps see if that's something that you have available or not.
Okay.
And it's not the end of the world if you don't have it. I mean, maybe there's a way that you guys can think about what you think would be affordable for you.
And then two other just kind of more general questions. Did you look at all at unmet transit needs reports?
Yeah, I did look at the unmet transit needs. They're kind of hard because they're largely, they say, I can go back and look at them. I was going to have a couple of paragraphs in the report, but many of them say, well, it seems like people come forward and say where they think there should be service, or there's a more thorough evaluation, and then they either say it's a problem or it's not a problem, or they say it's a problem and they can do something about it, and there's a problem and they can't do something about it. So that's, you know, the cost is prohibitive. But I will, in the report, go through and, you know, mention that information. We didn't, when we looked at it this summer, we didn't find it hugely informative, but perhaps for Kern it is. And I need to go back there and look at it more carefully.
And then my last question is on coming up in February, there's going to be an Air Resources Board grant available for car sharing.
Yeah.
And so I can see where some of this data will tie nicely into proposals for car sharing. Is there any intention to have, you know, data provided or being able to cite this study?
Oh yeah, also I have a ton of data. I was thinking about this morning. I am happy to reformat this data for you, provide the data, give you what you need for your report, for your application.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and you know, we can, I don't know when they're due, but you know, those of you who are thinking of applying, we probably need to have a conversation sooner rather than later. So, but we'll reach out to you. Okay, so moving on to King County, which is a tough nut to crack. So you've got it's a really you've got really long distances here, and pretty high population population levels for these areas. Avenal is clearly a place that the region, that county wants to address, and does have some significant challenges. I did find that there is, I don't know how you all feel about this, that there may be some kind of solution with the car sharing program in Avenal. I don't know, because there are 364 units that might be, I don't know how that resonates. Is Angie on the phone?
Is this the miles, sorry, this is Laura, but is this the miles to what?
It's to Hanford.
To Hanford, because I think what we were hearing too is that many of them are traveling to Fresno.
Yeah, and I do have that data, but I just didn't have the time to process it.
Okay, so I think in future iterations of this, it would be good for the destination. So in that column it says miles, is to miles to what city?
Yeah, this is a draft.
Yeah.
So I can provide, I have this data for all nearby destinations. When I reviewed it for this presentation, it didn't make a huge difference.
Okay.
Because you can get from Hanford, you can take a bus. They're pretty frequent services.
Oh, okay.
So when I looked at it, I don't see adding that analysis right now undermining the basic conclusions. Maybe some of my data is incomplete from Google Maps, but I have all that data I can show you for any reasonable destination cities. I have the data for. It's just that this is a lot of data, and that's even more data. So I don't know anyone from Avenal, if that resonates with you. From Kings County, anyone there?
This is Teresa Nickel. I haven't talked to Fernando, but yeah, the over $100 range is out of the question.
Yeah.
So maybe a ride-sharing program, but I just haven't heard much about it.
Yeah, car sharing, it could be a car sharing kind of / ride sharing that would be located in, an affordable housing unit in your area. Basically, the cost to use it, as I mentioned before, it seems reasonable that it could be about the actual cost $450 plus fees. And there are examples of these types of car sharing organizations in rural areas. And that's what I'm going to spend the next few months really looking at in more detail, is what, talking to these car sharing organizations in rural areas, what their experiences are, what it really costs, what are the critical needs to make them work. Because I don't know if we can get Zipcar to come in. Apparently it wasn't that easy to get Zipcar to come into Sacramento for their affordable housing project.
Huh.
So, but I'm just, this is, there's also some kind of ride sharing. And again, I don't really have enough information right now to understand if we could find kind of the density of users, where they could come together at certain points of day. For example, if you used a bridge type or via type services to get from one place or another, and what that would cost. That really depends on the density of the service. But I have heard that there is a rural location that in Texas, and they're experimenting with VIA, and then that it's a service that's operated by the transit agency, and that's what I'm going to really start focusing on next. What are the specifics about the alternative options for you? Okay.
All right, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next is Madera County. Now, Madera Amelia, you were able to provide me pretty recent data on costs for fixed route and dial-a-ride service, and it looks like, it's about $69 a trip so you're facing pretty high costs. And you can see here in all the areas identified, UberX may be able to provide that service at a lower cost. So that seems for you, that you're different. But this is just to Madera. The city of Madera. So I don't know if UberX is there right now, how hard it would get for them to come into your area, but you look like the county where this may work for you.
Okay. I do know that Uber is partially in the county.
Okay.
Mostly just in like half of the city of Madera, and then south towards Fresno County. So anywhere north of the city of Madera is not covered by Uber. Okay,
so we would, if there were incentives, and we had, this is a place where incentives could probably be used to encourage them to expand their boundaries.
Okay.
Based on your existing costs. So, if there's something, you're kind of unique here among the counties. It was pretty interesting to start getting this data and see what it kind of tells us. And it's just data. I mean, there's other, other things that aren't represented here, but it just, I think, gives us a direction that we can explore in more detail. Okay. Any questions? Any more questions about that?
No questions. I did just want to comment that I do appreciate you trying or wanting to do the map, putting the census tracts on the map.
Yes.
So that'll be a lot better visually. So I appreciate
Okay. Yep, I'm going to have them do it this week.
Okay, great.
I can share the maps. Okay. Here we go. Okay, Merced County. So this is a kind of a different animal here. In Merced County, you actually have a lot of high quality transit near the census tracts in Atwater, Winton, La Grande, Livington, and Los Banos. Correct me if I'm wrong. And you also have very low costs from what I was able to gather from your reports. But the problem, it seems to me, is that these areas, if you look at the maps, Winton covers kind of a large area that may be outside your transit area, and it's harder. Let's see, where are we? There's some distance to travel. So if you look at Winton and Snelling, those are large census tracts. But although they're less than 10 miles, it looks like 10 miles or less, perhaps the city centers. Correct me if I'm wrong. But
no, you're correct.
Okay, so I don't know what the terrain is like here. I mean, is this an area where you might consider kind of a first mile, last mile service? Even looking at, this is an area that might be interesting. Also, I mean, it won't work in the near term, but it could be very interesting to look at maybe an automated vehicle shuttle in a rural area to do first mile, last mile. Bike sharing. They even have these little vehicles now, personal vehicles that are not so expensive, that could be used as, part of a sharing system.
Yeah, we're doing the short-range transit plan too right now, and they were talking about some of those types of options within that for us as well. So that's kind of interesting that you're mentioning it as well. So maybe that's something we could look into.
Yeah, I mean, but you guys have really, frequent transit service. You've got a problem from in Snelling to Balico doesn't have good service.
Right.
But they don't have good internet. You don't have good mobile wireless service there either. In these Snelling, La Grande, some of these areas. And then you have the other areas that just are really far away. So that's a problem. So we'll just have to put our brain on some of those areas. And some of them have high populations.
Yes.
Like these ones.
Yeah.
So I'm just doing a time check. We have 5 more minutes, I think, for today, and we have 3 more counties.
Uh-oh.
So does
Okay.
anyone have to sign off right away at 11? I mean, those counties that we've already went through, I guess you can sign off, and we'll just plan to follow up with you afterwards with your transit agency to go over some of this. But so we have San Joaquin, Stanislaus, and I believe Tulare. So
yeah.
Did we have somebody jump on from Stanislaus?
¿Y sabe lo que da?
No. Let's just go to San Joaquin.
Okay, we got
so
San Joaquin.
I think these are more straightforward. So it looks like there are areas of Stockton and Manteca that, you may be able to use UberX and perhaps save some money. It looks like it's kind of low-hanging fruit here. The areas of Escalon, there are areas without this. However, the price isn't so huge. This is another area I know I've spoken to someone from Escalon, and I know there's a lot of concern there. So I do think there is some potential here for an, low-hanging fruit to expand the UberX boundaries. Okay, since we don't have as much time, I can talk to people in person. But Stanislaus, let's see.
Is there anyone from Stanislaus?
I'll skip them.
Okay.
No, you have someone from Stanislaus.
You do. Okay. Okay, Stanislaus. So basically, the Turlock, there's a census tract in Turlock that you could probably a census tract in Turlock and Modesto that could probably benefit from UberX boundary expansion, a pilot program to examine that. Patterson and Newman are a real challenge. So they're huge areas, and you actually do have really frequent transit in Patterson and Newman and dial-a-ride. It's just that it's a huge area to cover. I don't know, I have to look at the population distribution a little bit better, but this may be, I don't know if you have a sense if this is another place where we could look at a first and last mile service, bike share, automated shuttle, or, personal vehicle. I don't know what it looks like out there, but that's my suggestion for now.
I'm not sure about bike share, but the other 2 options, we might be able to look into that.
Okay. Yeah, I know safety is a huge issue. So, but what I was kind of thinking is if we did these personal vehicles initially, perhaps they could have like a separate lane or something like that, and that could be used kind of in preparation for automated shuttles, where you're, just kind of separating out a lane. The early versions of these automated shuttles kind of would require that, I believe. They're not going to be able to mix, integrate with regular traffic initially. Okay, so Tulare. Okay. Tulare, sorry. Okay, so this is another place where you have high quality transit in nearby Visalia and Early-Mart, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And, I believe the costs, or at least the cost data I have, are reasonable. So I was kind of I don't have much information on your costs in Tulare. So, maybe Visalia that's something you might want to consider UberX, but you do have really frequent transit service. You may want to consider a first and last mile service. Early-Mart has good transit service, 10 round trips a day. Your fixed route costs are pretty low, $9, relatively low. Visalia, Kingsburg, and Early-Mart has dial-a-ride service.
I want to let you know, Kingsburg and Orange Cove are in our county. They're in Fresno.
So these are areas that are called, they are designated census places that are in your county.
The residents are not in our county for either of those.
Okay. Well, there must be some other name, so I'll figure it out. But
well, part of Kingsburg does have part of Tulare County there, just south of there. So
yeah, a little edge of Kingsburg, but we would
yeah,
not
it's an edge.
consider
It's
that.
an edge, and I
so
think
you're not interested in Kingsburg, so
no.
I should take that out.
Right. It's predominantly Fresno County though.
Okay.
And Orange Cove is entirely so.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay. So any comments on that? This is the last slide where we're talking about this detailed information. Tulare has a lot of transit service actually relative to the rest of the region.
Okay. All right, and I know that was a quick snapshot for each county, and as you know, as we're mentioning, we'd like to schedule a round of calls with each of you and your transit agencies just to go through some of this data in more detail, especially some of the cost information that Caroline was unable to find. And so, you know, Michael, maybe we can connect on that afterwards to see if your office can help us schedule those.
Sure.
Okay. And then I think we just have one more thing here. So I was able to go to the meeting of the executive directors and provide a presentation. I think that was December. And one thing that we talked about was defining this capacity or readiness. And so what I heard, you know, additional to what we had proposed in our last TAC meeting, is from the directors is that having, you know, many of them were talking about, hey, I have somebody on my board, a supervisor, this is their key issue, their main issue, and, you know, we really want to get something in that area because of this, the support from that supervisor. And so that was something that we would like to follow up with each of you on, just to get a better understanding. If you have a strong advocate on your board for a certain community, we would want to know that. And then also, many of them were talking about having local funds available that they could use. So it wouldn't be necessarily, you know, not that they'd have to use all those funds to support a pilot, but many of them were interested in using some of their local sales tax money to support a pilot. And so that's something else we want to follow up with you all on these one-on-one calls, just to get a better understanding of what those local options would be. And so this is just, we put it down as questions on this slide just to let you know what we're thinking of, and we'd like to work with you more on just how to capture this capacity readiness and how to measure it. So with that, I think there's one more slide here. I think we've talked about this throughout today, and we want to follow up with you on the one-on-one calls. So you know, with that, is there any other additional questions that people have or feedback with us, for us? So with that silence, I'm going to assume no, but if you're just shy, you don't want to speak up, you can always just email Caroline or I about anything. And then I would just say expect an email from probably Michael, somebody in Michael's office, to schedule a one-on-one with each of you and your transit agency representative. All right, so that's all
Laura,
that we have today. Oh, I'm sorry, who was that?
Yes, Michael. The purpose of that meeting would to drill down further on this information and clean it up, and maybe have some maps that accompany it. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think what we want to make sure is that I've adequately captured, you know, all the maps with the census tracts. Make sure I've adequately captured transit service in your area.
And in any of the costs, there's some cost information that you were missing.
Yes.
And if there is something, we just want, like as Caroline has mentioned, even an estimate of what you think. If you don't have that, even just an estimate of what you think it will cost per passenger on some of those routes.
And also, if there were, you know, I only have the data for the, you know, the tax credit, affordable housing units. If you all had information on other types of housing units where you think there's, you know, pretty significant density, you know, near the census tract or in the census tract, that would be great.
Right. Self-help housing has done, you know, a vast majority of the USDA projects. So getting a database of their projects would
I have them. Oh, good.
cover a lot of ground.
They're the ones who are working with us. So right now, that was the next thing I want to do is I want to link the housing projects for self-help in these tables. I think they would be willing, to participate.
Right.
Yeah, in a pilot project.
For sure.
And we'll have data from all their units.
Okay.
Pretty soon.
Now, when we left these focus groups, we also, if you recall, we disaggregated into those communities that were close to metropolitan areas and those communities that were far away, and those communities that were far away and very low population, and so we couldn't really get to those. So how does the presentation today reflect that disaggregation that we did a while back?
That's a really good question. So I'm kind of feeling like we might need to have a different sort of categorization. And I need to get more data need to look at the distribution and density. But it seems to me the way it's,
I think that information is there. We can just make it. We just need to go back through and so for instance, Caroline, we're looking at the Fresno County chart that she put together. Let me just get that up so you guys can see it. Here we go. So some of that information is there because those were broken out by miles from the main metro center. Those three categorizations that you were mentioning, Michael. And so they were based on, how far is it from a metro center, and then what's the population.
Sure.
So I think we can reorganize it, and so to highlight and use those three categories. So that's what we'll try to incorporate into the next version of these tables.
Sure. It's just that the Uber X dollars doesn't apply then to some of them based upon our conversations earlier, right?
Yeah, I mean, basically, some places it's pretty clear.
Yeah, it's just pretty clear, like in what we thought too. The further you are, the more expensive it is, and that's what we assumed. We thought we'd just throw it up there just so.
But I mean, here we have actual dollars. I mean, so we can, there's been a lot of talk. It's not going to solve everything.
Sure.
And figuring out how to, it's that mid-range that's really hard, where the costs are fairly high, and you really would need a sharing system for sure. In a lower density area, that's going to be, we don't know how that would work or if we could make it work. What we have to understand are perhaps what are the characteristics of these communities where it would work. I mean, would they have to have pretty high density? But a lot of times there is transit service though, where you guys have high density. I mean, I came away from this thinking, gosh, they do a really good job. Serving what yes, I think you guys do a really great job. I mean, it's really impressive. How you can clearly see how resources are directed most effectively, and then how you're trying to provide lifeline service.
Right.
And I think you're doing a good job in a lot of these places. So.
Hey, this is Elizabeth from Tulare. I know we're trying to wrap up. Can you go back to the Tulare slide really quick, please?
Yeah. And again,
okay. Let me find it real quick. Right here. Oh wait, that's Merced.
Tulare,
right here.
Yeah.
So Kingsburg and Orange Cove, like I said, don't apply. California Hot Springs, that is not the population of California Hot Springs. I don't know if you're expanding the area, but that is an area we don't normally work in. It's very, but so I feel like there's a lot of analysis missing in our county based off of this list. There's a lot of areas. So.
Okay, well then perhaps we can, when we talk, I'll revise the list.
Okay,
and
thank you.
We can include those. I mean, because the data I have may not be accurate.
Oh, there's most definitely very, very few people in California Hot Springs. So that's not.
Okay.
I know you're just pulling data, but that one's not an option for us.
Okay, well that's good to know. I'm going to go back and check all these.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, so Laura and Caroline, seems like a TAC meeting next month. We want to try to have these one-on-one conversations instead. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that would be more useful. So to cancel our next all-COG TAC meeting and rather have one-on-ones?
Okay.
Well, I don't think we ever scheduled one. That's all I was
I don't
asking.
think we did either.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk offline, Michael, on the schedule, and then we'll get back to everybody.
Shani can make it. So.
Okay, sounds good to me.
All right.
Okay.
Well, thank you, everyone. We really appreciate you being on today's call, and we'll be in touch.
Somebody had a question.
Oh.
Hello?
Hello.
Hey, this is Isaiah from Stanislaus Council of Governments. I just had a quick question. You mentioned that you were going to add a column to describe what tract all this data corresponds to.
Yes.
Do you know if you'll have that before our meeting? I think.
That'll be for sure.
I just want to make sure.
I want to have the complete data before our meeting.
So, and we'll get a copy of that before we meet too, right?
Yes.
With the map? Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you, Caroline.
Okay, thank you. I'm hoping to have it, within the next week, that map. But I'd like to integrate a bit more of the data, so that might be 2 weeks.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
All right, everyone. Anything else? All right. Thank you for staying 12 minutes longer. Really appreciate it. We know you're all busy. And so with that, we'll just be in touch. And again, reach out to us at any time if you have questions that come up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.